Right, so here is one more look at how to paint on alpha, which is very useful when we paint clouds, but of course for many other effects as well. I have two clouds here so far, and what I hope to do in the end is to have 3 or 4 of these and put them all together into an animator brush. But let me show you how I'm going to paint this one. So I'm going to erase to white, right click on the erase tool, select white, and I'm going to go, I want to use these KB cloud brushes, such as this first one here, because I think they are really good for the type of clouds I want to draw. But again, I want to paint this straight into the alpha channel first. So I'm going to go erase, again, let's go here, erase to white. And then left button would paint black, right button would paint white. Okay, so how do I get this to go into the alpha channel? We've seen that there are some brushes that do that as sort of a shortcut, but they're limited to just 3 different shapes. Still, you could possibly also use the settings, and on the settings go to the effects tab right here, and from the main to the effects tab, enable effects and go down to the modal option and select such as like paint on alpha. Right, and there are different styles. There's modal, subtractive, additive, and so on. We're not going to use these. We're going to use the mode of paint on alpha. So when we do this, we essentially paint and it transfers straight to alpha. But sometimes you just don't want that transfer immediately, and you'd rather be focused on the grayscale image representing the alpha selection mask, the alpha channel. So here's another way to do that, and that might be perhaps your favorite in the end. Give them a try and experience some of the options. So the option basically is under the selection menu, where you'll see paint on selection. Right, and so what's happening with that is that you now you see down in the bottom right a small window here that indicates that this mode is active, the paint on alpha mode. And so you can paint with the left button. It still is not switching to alpha yet. It's you're basically looking at the alpha channel as a grayscale image here. Right, so that's applicable to many tools, by the way, not just the paint brushes. You can use the rectangle tools, for instance, that will go along that outline, or the rectangle fill tool, and all of this will eventually go on into alpha. When does it go to alpha? It's the moment you kill this mode, right? This mode here that says paint on alpha. You can barely see it. It's actually not visible here with this current recording because I'm not recording the full screen. Let me see if I can move it. There it is. Okay. So in the lower right corner is where it appears on my screen, probably on yours too. That's where you'll see this pop up, and when I kill it, it transfers everything into the alpha channel. Now you might still need to invert it. Right, you might go invert selection. There you go. If you actually wanted those rectangles to be selected rather than not selected, because when I paint black, it's what becomes eventually the non-selected pixels. If you transfer black into the alpha channel. So let's go do that for the clouds. Right, we might start. Well, we could start with black. Let's go erase black, and then right button. No, I'm still in the rectangle mode here. Let's go to the brush. And right button is black, left button is white. Okay, so now I'm painting the colors. What I want to do instead is paint on alpha. So let's go to selection and paint on selection. And there you go. So just to highlight it, there you go. Paint on alpha mode is active. And so I'm going to go and start painting. And maybe I'm doing some blobby clouds. Something like this. And again, don't look too much at the colors they have, but more at the shape that the whole thing outlines. This is your selection mask. This is not what the shading is going to look like. In fact, on the inside, if you want that to be all opaque, you want to really make it fully black. You can also perhaps add some other interesting things, such as a little bit of a motion blur there, like motion blur, because that could simulate sort of a strong wind distortion, like an anvil cloud kind of shape, but along the entire cloud. So do a little bit of that. And so let's say we have the shape we want for the selection. Let's go kill it. Let's click on the X here. And as the tooltip will say here, you're currently in paint on alpha mode. click to go back to regular painting. And so now you have a selection that was black in there, right, as you recall. The selection is therefore on the outside. The white part is the selected part. If you want to see it here, go to the selection menu and store that selection, and you see it indeed white on the outside. So you just have to invert that. You can do that right from here and replace it back in, so you now have the inside selected. It's difficult to see though. You don't see the coloration because the color itself, so the alpha channel is one thing, but the colors themselves are black too. Now if we erase everything, let's say image shift K, where is it, where we have the clear there. Oh, it's currently erasing to black, so we could go like this and hit shift K on the keyboard after we get keyboard focus. So now we have the selection on the inside and the pink appearing on the outside. All right, so that's creating the outline or the shape of the cloud. We can now still go back to that brush or other brushes, and no, there it is under the floating window of the browse to media, and select our KB, and let's say use the cloud brushes, and paint the actual shapes or the actual colors we want on those. All right, so let's say for instance we want to reduce the opacity a little bit on our brush so that we get only very soft hint of coloration there, and perhaps a little bit there, a little bit there, perhaps even reduce or increase rather the step distance, so it takes a few more dabs before it's actually showing the subtle level of gray here. Then right button to add a little bit of white again, a little bit more blur on the gray. So there's all sorts of different techniques to make it kind of the puffy look you want there. Okay, so let's say this is the cloud, maybe a little bit blur on the colors as well. Either that same motion blur or maybe something a little bit different. Let's try something like this. All right, and so then we pick this up as a custom brush just as we did before. Use the selected as brush. By the way, I'm going to also just store the image, which does store both the RGB and the alpha channel. All right, so we could perhaps use that later and get back to that, but I'll use the same technique as before here for brush. Use selected as brush, and so now I can show the custom brush. Make sure it's fully opaque as we view it. There you go. And we can go and store that brush too if we want to work with that some more. Store and manage it as a brush. We can minimize it. All right, so we do have these three images, three different clouds here. I didn't save this one yet. Let's go save it. Brush, save, and we have now cloud number 3. So we have 3 different saved PNG images of clouds. There you go. And now let's see how we can turn this into an animated cloud, not in the sense of it moving and changing shapes or animating in that sense, but rather a sequence of images that will have not just one image, but all these 3. Because right now if I look at this one, or if I look at this one, the store brush of number 2 and the store brush of number 3, they're all different, but they're also each just one single image. So if I click this guy, I paint with that. If I pick this guy, I paint with that. And I still have the random size, position, angles and all that, which of course I would need to perhaps get rid of. So let's say brush settings, let's go back to main parameters, reduce this to 0, reduce the random position to 0, the random size and the random angle. So all of this really now doesn't leave much randomness to it, and it's just a single predictable image. What you can do though is for each of those put them all together into a single image. So let's make sure we don't have any extra resize. All of them are at their respective original sizes, and what I'd like to do is really pick this guy and store it one more time, store and manage a copy, and then on this one I'll also want to add this one and this one. So all of these 3 will be added into a single stored brush, and it's really just to visualize it, but you can do that actually. What I'll do is I'll visualize it here by using the show film strip, right? And right now we have just one image. Then I'm going to go pick this guy and add a frame. Now we have 2 images. Then I'm going to go pick this guy and add that frame too. Now we have 3 images. So we now have an animated brush with 3 different clouds in it. So let's say you paint, half a dozen or 10 different clouds of slightly different shapes or drastically different shapes. You now have a much more interesting cloud to work with, which you can also save. Right? You can go to Brush, Animated Brush, and save it, and that will be a different format. It won't be the PNG file, but of course the individual images you can save individually like I did earlier. I'm going to go minimize all this now and work just with this one animated brush. And as you can tell, it's taking one image, going to the next, and it's doing that pretty quickly. So you might want to have a slightly different step distance here, but that's the whole point about it here, is that you can work with that and perhaps even add a little bit of added transparency. So the clouds are appearing, but they're not appearing too opaque or too quickly. By virtue of using this step distance, you have to move that mouse quite a bit before it appears. All right, so that's one step closer to our ideal set of clouds. The last step we want really is to be able to have it automatically scale, so that if we have a perspective view with a cloud, something like a sky, kind of similar to this. Remember in the prior video we had some large clouds up here, but then automatically make them go smaller in the distance, right? And that's what we'll do in the next tutorial, using an image in the swap buffer, or on what we call the swap image, that will apply a force, or rather a resizing or rescaling of the current brush as you move up or down along that distance in the perspective view. All right, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.